All right. Good morning. So we're on Daf Masechet Makkot, Daf Kaf Amud Bet, towards the bottom of the Amud, towards the bottom of the Daf. We've been discussing the dinim of Mekif Ba'atul Shor Ba'atz Kanora. Our Mishnah listed. You remember our Mishnah listed 4 cases, 4 different isurim over which one would get Makkot. That's obviously the theme of our Masechet and the theme of our Perek. We spoke about, and we're going to go through them now again. We spoke about Pa'atz Kanor, Pa'at Rosho, so the prohibition of shaving one's hair and shaving one's beard, as well as that'll be with a blade, of course. We'll go into further detail, and the prohibition of lo yikrechu korcha and lo yisratu saretet. In other words, not to tear out one's hair and not to create an incision, a wound on one's flesh, as a sign of excessive grief, as a sign of excessive mourning over somebody who had died. So here the Gemara says we're about eight lines from the bottom. Right, that's where from the 2 dots. It's going back. That was where our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah, the second line of the Mishnah, which is on Amud Aleph, said Asoret Srita Achat Ala Met Chayav. Sarat Srita Achat Al Chamisha Metim or Chamesh Sritot Al Met Echad Heva Kol Achat V'Achat. Well, we said that if one was to create one wound for one mate, so they would be chayav for that. And if one was to do one wound for 5 different people who had died, it was just one action, but it was rather had intent for 5 different metim, that would be 5 different chiyuvim. Or vice versa, if it was for one mate, but one person did it 5 times, so there would also be 5 different chiyuvim. So here says the Gemara, it says Masaret Shitach B'Chol. Tanu Rabbanan. We learn in a Braita as follows. Tanu Rabbanan v'sarat yachol afilu sarat al beito shnafal v'asvinato shetva bayam. So the pasuk is v'sarat lanefesh lo titnu b'vsachem uchtovet karka lo titenu lo titnu v'chem ani Hashem. Right. So what we're dealing with now is the first half of the pasuk. It says seret la nefesh lo titnu b'vsachem. Don't make a wound in your flesh. Right. Seret la nefesh for a nefesh, for somebody who has died. And then it talks about ktovet ka'ka lo titnu. Don't make a tattoo. Don't make a permanent inking. We'll discuss that in the next Mishnah. But so over here we say from the fact that it says seret. Right, from the word seret, you might think when it says don't make a wound in your flesh over, why would you do this? You do this because you were depressed. You do this because you've heard of something bad. So says the Gemara, the Havamina is, you might have thought, seret, yachol afilu seret al beito shnafal, v'svinato shetva bayam. Persons, there was an earthquake and their house came crashing down, or their ship sank in the sea. In other words, there was some kind of monetary loss. There was some other bad news that came, and a person's very depressed. And because of that, they go and wound themselves, right? So you might have thought you're not allowed to do that either, but you're not going to be chayav. So you might have thought that over there in that case, v'seret yachol afilu sarat al beito shnafal v'asvinato shetva bayam. Even for one of these other cases, you might have thought that would be included here, and you would get Makkot for that as well. No, Talmud lamala nefesh says the Torah. It says v'seret la nefesh, only la nefesh where this would apply. Again, it could be, if we understand where the Rambam seems to understand that all of these are based on the idolatrous practices that were in those days, and this is part of the way of the Torah of distancing us from idolatry, just as the idolaters would perform this kind of ceremony, right? If somebody had died, so we should not do that, and that's why only that case would be included. Okay.
Rabbi Kenigsberg.
Sorry?
I've actually witnessed this at funerals here in Israel. I mean, it's not history. Women defacing themselves, scratching their cheeks and making them bleed.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's why. So we have within Hilchot Avelot, right? We have the din of Kriya. Again, when you think about it, I mean, Kriya, once upon a time, was meant to be something which was much more probably spontaneous. Now it's very, very sort of controlled. We delay until the funeral. It's done in a certain way. But that's the idea of, rending one's garments, of tearing, of being able to have that emotional outlet as well in terms of expressing that grief. But it should be, but it is defined in a certain way and it is limited, and it should not be excessive. So, okay, now says the Gemara, continues the Braita, right? That's what we saw. That's what we saw in the Mishnah, that if it was a person did this 5 times for one mate, that it would be chayav for each one. So Talmud Lomar v'seret. From the fact that it says v'seret, we learn that there would be an individual chiyuv of Makkot for each one. Have a look at the Rivan over here at the bottom of the page, second last line. He says Talmud Lomar v'seret. The matzi lemichtav. Then he gives 2 explanations. Matzi lemichtav lenefesh lo tisratu. Right? The pasuk, he says, could have said la nefesh lo tisratu. Why does it say v'seret la nefesh lo titeinu? In other words, that on each seret, each wound that one would make for that nefesh, there would be a separate chiyuv. That is explanation number 1. He says lashon acher. Alternatively, you might say Talmud lomar v'seret miribuya devav. From the fact that it says v'seret, the extra vav that comes to teach us, there are extra cases. And then says the Gemara, now we have a Rabbi Yossi Omer, Minayin lamesaret shrita achat al chamisha metim shu chayav. Right. So again, in our Mishnah we saw already, we had two different cases. One case was where a person made 5 different incisions, 5 different wounds for one mate. Then there would be 5 different chiyuvim, as you've just seen from the fact that it says v'seret, whichever way we learn it. And then it was then that even if a person just did one action, but it was on 5 different matim, lo aleinu, a person gets terrible news that 5 different family members have passed away, right? So he does one shrita on all 5. How do we know that would be 5 different chiyuvim? So Rabbi Yossi Omer, minayna mesaret shrita achat al chamisha meitim shu chayav al kol achat ve'achat, Talmud lomar lenefesh. Lechayev al kol nefesh v'nefesh. Since it says v'seret, we learned that from the fact it says v'seret teaches you that there's going to be a chiyuv on each seret that you make. But from the fact that it says v'seret lenefesh, that means on each and every different nefesh. That is the limit of Rabbi Yossi. Now, the alarm bell should be ringing. You should say, wait a minute, there is a problem. How can Rabbi Yossi learn that? Didn't we just say a few lines earlier that we learned something else from Benefesh, right? Starting again from the Gemara we started reading, we said, Tan Rabbanan, Seret Yachol Afilu Sarat Al Beito, Shenafal Al Svinato Shtva Bayam. We said, how do you know that this din is only applying to a case of a met and not any other tragedy that has happened to a person? Talmud Lomar La Nefesh, because it says La Nefesh. So from the word La Nefesh, we already learned that this is only a case where it is Shrita La Met, and not where it's a case of shrita because of something else which has happened. And now Rabbi Yossi is saying that from the word v'nefesh we learn right lechayev al kol nefesh v'nefesh, that each one is a separate prohibition. But wait a minute, we've just learned that v'nefesh was something else, so it's not available, so to speak. That word is not free for us to make another drasha. So says the Gemara, this is a problem. V'hapiktei lebeito shenafa v'lesfinato shetva bayam. Didn't you already use it? Didn't you already use this word to teach you for the case of Beitosh Nafal Svina Shentava Bayam? Says the Rivan, Los Lana Victele Beitosh Nafal. Vadai Rabbi Yossi lo Palek. Rabbi Yossi definitely doesn't argue on the previous drasha. That is the simple reading, that's the simple explanation of the pasuk. We aren't going to say that Rabbi Yossi is going to uproot the pshat. So how does Rabbi Yossi then learn from this word nefesh for something else? So over the page, onto the top of Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph, it says Kasavar Rabbi Yossi Srita v'Gdida Achati. Right, we have 2 psukim. We have the pasuk that talks about Srita. We also have the pasuk that tells us Lotit Godedu. Right? which essentially says lot is got to do lamet. So Rabbi Yossi understands, why does the Torah say two different places with these two different words? What are they? Are they referring to the same case? Are they referring to different cases? So Rabbi Yossi, and both of them refer to in some way wounding oneself as a sign of excessive grief. So Rabbi Yossi says, Shrita v'gdida achati, they're both really the same thing. Uchtiv hatam lamet. And in the pasuk regarding gdida, it says lot is got to do lamet. Okay, so it comes out a little bit funny, because essentially what you're saying is the Gemara seems to be accepting the challenge. Meaning Rabbi Yossi said, our question was, how do we know that if there are five metim and it's one and it's one shrita, that you're going to be chayav 5 times? So Rabbi Yossi said from the word la nefesh, but we said, you've already learned out something else from the word la nefesh, of the case of his house or his ship got lost, whatever it is. So we say no. Rabbi Yossi said learns out shrita and gedida, so it's really from the fact that by gedida, by lot it got to do, it says the word lamet. The same way it says la nefesh, over there it says lamet. So really Rabbi Yossi's limud is not from the pasuk that says la nefesh. It's from the other pasuk of lot it got to do, it says lamet. So why didn't it just say that Rabbi Yossi says lamet? Okay, but that is that's what it means. Rivan, top of the page, he says kasavar Rabbi Yossi shrita gedida achati. The Tavayu is that both of these, i.e., both Shrita and Gedida, are the same thing. Bein bayad, bein bakli. A person could do it with their hands, right? Or they could make a wound, or they could scratch themselves, or they could do it with a kli, with a knife or something like that. Uchtiv begdida lamet lotit godedu v'lot asimu kolcha. Right there, you have the pasuk by lotit godedu. It's the same pasuk that invokes the idea of wounding one's flesh and of pulling one's hair, but it says there lot is got to do lamet. Okay, so now, so that is Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says essentially that Shrita and Gedida are the same thing. That both Shrita and Gedida could be bayad and both could be bakli. Why in one place does the Torah say Shrita and why in another place does the Torah say Gedida? Different words for the same thing. Amar Shmuel. Hamisaret bakli chayav. Okay, so Shmuel says, therefore, continue. Until now, the understanding seems to be that misaret, that creating this wound, this incision in the flesh, was done with the hand. Shmuel says, if you did it with a kli, you would also be chayav. So meitivei. So now the Gemara asks a question. So meitivei shrita ugdida achati ela. So we now have an opinion which is actually different to Rabbi Yossi. That why did the Torah say Shrita and Gdida? Both Shrita and Gdida are the same thing. Both Shrita and Gdida refer to wounding oneself, creating an incision in one's flesh. That's what both mean. But these are different words which refer to different things. Shrita means one did it with one's hand. Gdida means that one did it with a kli. That's what the word means. So how can Shmuel say, when Shmuel comes along and says Hamasaret bakli chayav, it's just not correct language, right? Masaret means with the hand. Gedida means with a kli. So how can that be? So answers the Gemara, Da'amalka Rabbi Yossi, that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yossi. In other words, we have two different ways of learning the difference between Shrita and Gedida. According to Rabbi Yossi, Shrita and Gedida are the same, and both can be with a hand, and both can be with a kli. According to the other opinion, which is brought, and Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yossi. According to the other opinion, Shrita means with a hand, and Gedida means with a kli. But so in other words, according to that second opinion, what Shmuel is trying to say, that when Shmuel says Shrita bakli chayav, they would say no, it's not Shrita, it's Gedida. But nonetheless, it's the same thing, and it would still be chayav Makkot either way. Says Rivan, the end of the top line, he says, "I'm saret bakli chayav." This is in that's what Shmuel said. He says, "Havadai pshita lekulei alma, diikar gedida mashma bakli, v'ikar shrita mashma bayat." In other words, says Rivan, everybody will agree. It's obvious and simple to everybody that when the Torah says gedida, the main meaning of the verb gedida means with a kli, And the primary meaning, understanding of the word shrita is with the yad. That's why the Torah uses two different words. But what are Rabbi Yossi and Shmuel going to add? K'amar Shmuel ha'mesaret b'kli alamet chayav v'lo k'amar megaded b'kli. In other words, Shmuel comes along and says specifically that mesaret with a kli is going to be chayav, and he said mesaret, and he did not say megaded. Lashmuina, in order to teach us the shem srita shayach b'kli, that although usually when you say srita you mean with the hand, but it could also refer to a kli as well. V'avseh chabura b'atzmo b'kli alamet chayav shnei lavim. So actually comes out, this will be the nafkamina. Comes out according to Shmuel, that somebody who makes a wound on themselves with a kli over a met is going to be chayav twice. Two lavim, one mishum mesaret, mishum megaded. Digdidav shrita achati tavayu bein bayad bein bekli. Both of them are the same thing, whether it's with the hand or with a kli. Does that mean also that if one did it with one's hand, that would also be chayav of two lavim according to Shmuel? Not sure. Seemingly yes. Well, unless you say that no, Shmuel specifically spoke about with a kli to tell you that you're chayav. To tell you in that case you'd be chayav for two, but not the other case. But either way, Shmuel says that the term mesaret or megaded both can refer to with the hand and both can refer to with a kli, even though that's not the primary. Meaning. And then we said meiti ve'gdidah shrita achati, says the one who challenges this opinion. Says klomar, continues Rivan, klomar bein shrita bein gdidah inyan chabulaim, whether it's shrita or gdidah, whichever one, but both mean the same thing. Both mean a wound. V'shnei mamet, and both of them referring to one who over a death. And shrita b'yad gdidah b'kli, but shrita only means with the hand, and gdidah only means with a kli. V'kasha l'shmuel damar tavayu bein b'yad bein b'kli, and therefore that is the kasha on Shmuel. Mid'kamar mesaret b'kli v'lo kamar megaded b'kli. Right, because of the fact that Shmuel said mesaret b'kli and not megaded, so miklal the shrita shaycha b'kli kegdida. Therefore, and that's exactly the point he was trying to prove. Okay, so that is therefore a machloket, and Shmuel therefore holds like the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Tani Tana continues the Gemara. So we say b'kli u'dakamak Rabbi Yossi. Tani Tana kamed Rabbi Yochanan. The following brayta was taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Almet ben bayad ben b'kli chayav al avodat kochavim bayad chayav b'kli patur. Okay, so now we add on to something else. As we said, there's a lot of these laws are similar and are distancing us from the practices of avodah zarah. So it was one of the practices of avodah zarah was also to wound oneself, right? So not as a sign of mourning, but this was as a sign of worship. This was part of the way that the idolatrous practices were, that one would wound themselves. So in the same way that one cannot make a wound on oneself for as a sign of mourning, so too one cannot make a wound on oneself as part of worship of avodah zarah. That would be worse. Avodah zarah is going to be chayav mitah if a person did it. So just a little bit of background. If a person was chas v'chalila to worship avodah zarah, to perform some sort of service, so there are three types of acts for which we have to distinguish. Number one is there are certain types of acts which are classified as avodah, right, which are classified as worship. So these are things like, if you were to bring a korban, or you were to offer up incense, or you were to bow down, or you were to sprinkle the blood of a korban on a mizbech, things which are bona fide acts of worship. For all those cases, one was to do that for avodah zarah, one would be chayav mitah. Doesn't matter if that is the specific way that this avodah zarah has. This is their worship, right? Each avodah zarah has got its own laws and it's got its own particular ways of worship. But we say, number one, if there is an act which is a bona fide act of worship, whether it's particular to this avodah zarah or not is irrelevant. For that, one would be chayav mitah. Then the second category is acts which are specific to this avodah zarah, right? And this is going to be an example. So these are acts which are not necessarily acts of worship, but because they are Well, this avodah zarah, this is its way, its specific way of worship. So for that one would be chayav mita as well. Then the third category would be an act which is not necessarily an act of worship. One does it in order to serve the avodah zarah, but it's not its specific way. It's not derech avodah b'kach. Then one would not be chayav mita. So what the Gemara here comes to teach us is that wounding oneself in a certain way would be the specific act of worship for this avodah zarah, and therefore one would be chayav. So in which way? So unlike the case of shrita, which we've just explained regarding shrita over a mate, so there, whether it's b'yad or whether it's b'kli, one would be chayav. So we call it shrita or b'didah, as the machlok we've just seen. But either way, one would be chayav for it, right? So that is what the Bride says first. Tani Tana Kamei Rabbi Yochanan, our mate. If one was creating a chabura, creating this wound over a mate, bein bayad, bein bakli, chayav. Whether you did it with your hand or you did it with a kli, you'd be chayav malkut for that. However, al avodat kochavim, when it comes to avodah zarah, if a person was creating this wound on themselves as part of worshipping this avodah zarah, so then we say b'yad chayav, b'kli patur, with one's hand, then one would be chayav mita. But if it was done with a kli, then one would be exempt. Still forbidden, right? But it would be exempt. Why? Because that seemingly is with a kli is not the normal derech avodah, not the way that it would be worshipped. So Rivan says over here, alamet ben bayad ben bakli chayav desrita ugdida aktiv. Right, both Shrita and Gdida are written, the Tavayo Asreno Rahmana. Both of those would be forbidden by the Torah. Al Avodat Kochavim, but regarding idolatry, the Yesh Avodat Kochavim Sheovdinot Abakach. There are types of Avodah Zarah. This is their specific way of worship. They would injure themselves. That's how they would do it. Sheosin Bivsaram Chaburot Uptaot. They would create wounds in their body. So Beyad Chayav. The derech avodat habekach says Rivan that this is the regular, this is a specific form of worship. V'afilu avodat kochavim she'en avodat habekach, even if it's a type of this specific avodah zarah where it's not its type of worship, chayav d'avodah gmurai b'yad. Nonetheless, this is a bona fide act of worship. This is how many do, and therefore with the hand one would be chayav as opposed to with a kli, where one would be patur. So says the Gemara, wait a minute. The ha'ipcha, we're now into the wide lines of the Gemara. It says ha'ipcha ktiv. We have a pasuk that teaches us actually the opposite. We just said that for avodat kochavim b'yad you'd be chayav and b'kli you'd be patur. But ha'ipcha ktiv, it teaches the opposite. This is the pasuk in Sefer Melachim when regarding the Nevi'ei HaBa'al, and it says Vayitgodedu kamishpatam b'charavot uvaramachem, that they wounded themselves, as was part of their mishpat, as was part of their practice of the avodah zarah, b'charavot uvaramachem, with swords and with spears. In other words, we see over there that the way of doing the avodah zarah was with a kli, not with a hand. So it says, no, you're right. So therefore, we have to turn it around. Actually, it is bayad. It is with a hand. That would be patur, then it's with a kli, that would be chayav if one does this chabura as part of avodah zarah. Says the Rivan, v'ha'ipchaktiv tibekli derech avodah avodat kochavim, right? That it's with the kli, that this is the way of worship of avodah zarah. Dichtiv v'yitgodedu kamishpatam asu gdida k'derech shayur gilin nasot. They made this gdida, they made this wound the way that they were accustomed to doing. With their swords and their spears. Therefore, we learn that this is the way it's with a kli. Okay. Continue now. We're on the second wide line. Continues the Gemara. We then spoke about the differences in terms of the Peat HaRosh and Peat HaZakan, in terms of shaving. The Mishnah told us that again, there you could be chayav more than one. For one action, you could have more than one set of Makkot. Right? We said the next line in the Mishnah was Alalosh Shtayim Achad Mikan V'Achad Mikan. that on the head there are two sides, right? Two corners, two payot, one on one side and one on the other side. V'alazakan, we said shtayim mikan v'shtayim mikan v'achat milamata, that there was two on each side and one below. So now it says, where exactly are these places? Where are these corners? We don't know. We have different opinions in the Rishonim, precisely how to define them and how to locate them. So there are going to be different ways of understanding this Gemara. The Gemara here just says that Rav Sheshet did not just teach this, but he showed it, he demonstrated between sort of the joints, between the bones on the side of the head, that is where these payot were. Okay, and big discussion in the Rishonim exactly how we define it. V'alazakan, shtayim mekan v'shtayim mekan v'achat milamata. Same thing. Machvir Rav Sheshet bein Pirkei Dikna, between the different, maybe the cheekbones, the bones on the face, between the different corners of the beard. He demonstrated where that was. It doesn't help us too much because he didn't demonstrate it to us. And then Rabbi Eliezer Omer im natlan. So the next part of the Mishnah was that Rabbi Eliezer. So reading in the Mishnah, it says Rabbi Eliezer Omer im nitlu kulan. Okay, slightly different girsa. The Mishnah said nitlu, and here the Gemara says nitlan. But im nitlu kulan kechat, eino chayav ela achat. That if you were to, in one action, you were to remove everything, to remove all the hairs, one would only be, in this case, one would only be chayav once. And then it said in the Mishnah, eino chayav ashid leno batar. All of this is only one's going to be chayav for removing with a razor, with a blade. Different types of implements. Rabbi Eliezer said if you had maybe sort of a tweezers or a blade, then also that you would be chayav. Okay, so says the Gemara v'ya im netalan. So Rabbi Eliezer said im netalan, that if you took all five corners of the beard, you would only be chayav once. So he says kasava chad lavu. He holds that these are not five separate lavim, but this is all one lav, and that therefore one would only be chayav once. Eino chayav ad shedena b'tar tana rabanan. So here we have a braita. Upe'atz kanam lo yegalech. Okay, so what's interesting is that we actually have a couple of we have two different psukim regarding this issue of shaving one's beard, and just like we saw previously by the din of karcha, we have one pasuk in Parashat Emor, and then we have another one later on. But one of them is referring to Israel. One of them is referring specifically to the Kohanim. So if you have a look on the side, you see the pasuk says, "Lo yikrachu karcha b'rosham upe'atz kanam lo yigalechu ubivsaram lo yisratu saratet." So that is the pasuk that is actually referring to the Kohanim specifically. That is in Parashat Emor, and there it says "Pe'atz kanam lo yigalechu." There it uses the word legalech. We have another pasuk in Vayikrat Yutet Kaf Zayin in Parashat Kedoshim, which says "Lo takifu pe'atz roshchem v'lo tashchit et pe'atz kanecha." Do not to destroy the corners of your beard, right? So there, use the word tashchit, and there it's talking to all of Am Yisrael. So the word yigalechu, again, important to understand, is dealing here in the pasuk that addresses the Kohanim, but the Gemara is going to learn out that since it says pe'atz kanam in both of those pasukim, we're going to learn a gzera shava from one to the other. We're going to learn a gzera shava, and therefore the dinim which we say by the Kohanim are going to apply by all of Am Yisrael as well. If you just have a look at Rivan, already points this out. So a little bit further down in the Rivan, there's the Dibur Matchil that begins. It says Pa'atz kanam lo yigalechu. He says Gabe Kohanim ktiv. That pasuk that says Pa'atz kanam lo yigalechu, that is written regarding the Kohanim. V'lo tashchit et pa'atz kanecha b'Yisrael ktiv. And the pasuk that says don't destroy lo tashchit, that is regarding Israel. We learn out from a gzera shava, one from the other. The peah, and that's the gzera shava that both use the word peah. V'achi amrinan v'heder Perek the kiddushin gzera shava So it says in the Gemara in Kiddushin, in the first Perek, there it says it explicitly. It mentions that there's a Gezerah Shavah. Yeah, I don't think the Gemara actually mentions explicitly this Gezerah Shavah, but he's just giving you the background. That's what it's based on, and we see it in other places as well. So says the Gemara, right? So you might have thought when it says lo yigalechu, do not shave. What does shave mean? Shave might mean just cut it off as well, even if it's with the scissors, right? That you would be chayav as well. Talmud lomar lo tashchit. Therefore, it comes to tell you, no. It's not just lo yigalechu, but it's also lo tashchit. Right now, we understand why. Obviously, there needs to be a Gezerah Shavah. These are two psukim referring to two different groups of people. How do we learn one from the other? So here, the Gemara just takes it as a given that you can learn one to the other, the Gezerah Shavah. That's what the Rivan was explaining to us. So, from the fact that it says Lo Yigalechu, you might have thought, no, within Sparayim, that would also be asur. But from the fact that it says Lo Tashchit, no. So, Lo Tashchit, well, wait a minute. Now, if it just says Lo Tashchit, which means you completely destroy, right, we shave with the we shave with a blade, and that would completely remove the hair all the way to its roots. That would be hashchata. Ilot hashchit yachol im liktor b'melaket v'rehitne yechayav. So now you would have thought if it is lot hashchit, so these other sort of implements like a tweezers and a plane, which also cause. The point is these are not the normal way of giluach. These are not the normal implements of shaving, but these would fulfill the criteria of hashchata as well. So, ilot hashchit, if it is lot hashchit, you might have thought that if you use these other instruments, then one would be chayav there as well. But the Mishnah said for that you wouldn't be. So Talmud lamar lo yigalechu. So no, we go back. It's both. It has to be giluach and hashchata. It says ha keitzad. How can it be? Giluach sheyesh bo hashchata. In other words, it's both the ordinary way of what is considered shaving, but it's also in a way that creates hashchata, that removes the hair completely from the root. Both of those. And what is those? What is giluach sheyesh bo hashchata ve'amer zetar? That would be with a razor, and therefore that is that is what is forbidden. Again, the Rivan says over here, Talmud lomar lo tashchet. He says, misparayim, einan mashchitim. If one would use scissors, or, and this is, again, the discussion regarding electric shavers, etc., that if it acts, that if the cutting takes place in such a way that is similar to the act of a scissors, as opposed to the act of a blade, so that is einan mashchitim, she'en chotchin se'ar, b'tzad ikar katar, because it does not remove the hair all the way to the root. It just cuts a little bit less. Right, and then it continues. Rivan giluach sheyesh bo hashchata. Says derech legalech bo umashchit. It needs to be both. One that is the usual shaving implement, and it is also mashchit, also destroys. V'hainu tar, and that is a razor. Aval rehitni mashchit v'ein derech legalech. Boy, a plane you would destroy, but that is not an instrument which is used for shaving. Umisparayim. And scissors, on the other hand, that would use for shaving, but they do not destroy, and therefore that would be permitted. Now in the Mishnah we had another view, when the view of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, chayav. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Ma nafshach? If Rabbi Eliezer learned this Gezerah Shavah, which Gezerah Shavah? Again, this is the Gezerah Shavah, which the Gemara didn't mention explicitly, but it's the Gezerah Shavah of pe'ah, and we therefore associate that in the same mitzvah, both giluach and hashchata. So if Rabbi Eliezer held by that Gezerah Shavah, so then you would say you would have to be a tar, would have to be a razor, only then would it be chayav. If you do not learn the Gezerah Shavah, so any giluach, even misparayim, would be forbidden. So he says no, that really Rabbi Eliezer does hold by the Gezerah Shavah, but he holds that these things, melaket for a hitni, that these are also the standard way of shaving, and therefore he would forbid those. He would forbid those as well. We said that the Tanakama does not hold that they are giluach, holds that they be hashchata, but they would not be giluach, whereas Rabbi Eliezer would hold that as well. Okay, so that is the end of the Gemara. We're up to there. We're on to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah is going to discuss the Ktovet Ka'aka, which we mentioned briefly before. We saw that in the Pasuk. It's going to be a tattoo. What are the conditions, and when is that going to be forbidden? With your permission, we will stop here. As you can hear, my voice is still a little bit, still recovering from Shavuot. So, but we're there at the next Mishnah, so a little bit early, but we'll end it here for today, and we will continue tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem. Have a great day, everyone.
Oh,
Thank you, Rav. Well tov. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Tov. Thank you.